highest fold extract that Beck used to make was a 20-fold.
Does vanilla ever go bad?
Basically, if they're kept in a tight bottle, they're like wine. The longer they sit around, the better they get.
Like wine or like Michael Schubert? What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Behind the Flavor, a podcast brought to you by Beck Flavors and hosted by yours truly, Michael Schubert. Today we have a really special guest with us. We have the one, the only, Mr. Kevin Berdak, one of our certified flavorists here at Beck Flavors. How are we doing today, Kevin?
I'm doing great, Mike. How about yourself?
We're living the dream, having a good time, but I'm really excited to kind of get into this episode today. This one kind of strikes true to the heart of Beck Flavors, as we're going to start talking about vanilla, which is where Beck got its roots in 1904. So a quick question, Kevin. When was the first time you came across vanilla?
I think I was a little kid.
A little kid?
My mom was baking some cookies, and she brought out a bottle of vanilla extract, and I was like, okay. I smelled it. It smelled good.
Yeah, and then from right there, you were like, you know what? I'm getting into the flavor world. I'm going to start helping produce vanilla. That was it right there.
Sounds reasonable.
Sounds reasonable. So let's kind of segue a little bit there how did you find out about Beck? What brought you to Beck?
Actually, I saw a job posting when I was going to school. I was working on my chemistry degree, and there's a job posting looking for a lab tech to work at Beck Flavors. And went over there, checked the place out, and I was like, wow, this is nice.
Awesome. So that's how you kind of found out about Beck. So right then, when you started at Beck, was the first thing that you started working on, was that vanilla?
Actually was. Beck was producing a lot of vanilla, and it was a pretty involved process that they used for making it. And part of the thing that we were doing in the lab was making sure that the quality was maintained and that we kept a good quality product coming out.
Awesome. So what is a good way to tell the quality of a vanilla?
Back then, we would actually we'd taste it, and then we'd go off of vanillin content, and there was an old test that you could use to determine what the fold strength was, and we'd run all those tests, and plus check the alcohol levels on it to make sure they were okay, and if everything looked good, then it was good to go.
Okay, so is there like a standard identity for vanilla? Is that why you have all these tests that can tell you like, yes, this isn't a pure extract and things like that?
There is a standard, actually vanilla is one of the few flavors that actually has a standard of identity.
Oh, really?
And standard of identity is actually set by the FDA, and they say that if you want to call something a vanilla extract, then you have to have a minimum of 35% alcohol in it, and you have to extract the equivalent of 10 ounces of dry weight of beans, vanilla beans, per gallon of that 35% alcohol in order to call it basically what they call a single strength vanilla, or single fold vanilla extract.
Okay, so that's very, very interesting. There's a couple parts there that interest me. So you said that 10 pounds of vanilla beans,
10 ounces.
10 ounces is what you have to start with before you can yield out the finished product. So you can't do a batch size smaller than that, is what you're saying?
You can,
but
okay. You still got to keep those same ratios.
Okay. Does it come into more of like a diluting thing at that point?
No, it's just more that if you want to make it smaller, like a half-gallon batch, then use 5 ounces of beans. Now, these are 5 ounces of dry weight of beans because all vanilla beans have moisture in it, and you have to account for the moisture that's in the beans, so you may have to actually up the amount of vanilla you use to up the difference, but it comes out to the equivalent of 10 ounces of dry weight with no moisture in vanilla beans.
That makes a lot of sense there. The other thing that we had kind of mentioned is that that you have to start with something. And for those of our fans that don't know, an extract is a different type of flavor because of the way it's produced. You usually start with a total poundage, and then you'll, like these dried beans that Kevin's talking about, and then you'll use a alcohol of some sort to extract that. Typically people use ethanol, I believe, is the best one that is used, and the one that you need to use to make a vanilla extract.
Yes, that is correct.
Awesome. And then from there, what you end up with is, if you start with, say, 100 pounds of the dried bean, and I'm not off the top of my head knowing all the yields, but you may end up with 70 pounds of liquid extract after it. Now, the ratio may be a little different, but...
Yeah, actually wind up with more on things, but but roughly, like I say, that it comes out to 10 ounces per gallon of things of that. So at Beck, they actually had these large extractors that would do 300 gallons at a pop of that. So you back calculate on that. So you're talking roughly 200 something pounds worth of vanilla beans that would be put in these things. And you would add alcohol, you dilute it back to 35% alcohol concentration or 70 proof with water, and you would recirculate that water over the beans. And that, in Beck's case, what they would do is they would do a heated extraction, so they'd actually heat that liquid up to roughly about 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and they would circulate that hot water over the vanilla beans, and that would go on for about 2 to 3 days.
Oh, so it's a time-consuming process.
It is
at that.
time-consuming.
Does that play into a little bit of the supply and demand that we see in the vanilla markets?
It does to some degree. The bigger supply and demand thing is the fact that to produce vanilla beans is very, very labor intensive, and it's very specific to certain areas because it's very limited growing regions that it can actually grow.
I might have to piggyback on that. Do you know the regions that they grow in?
Yes, actually do with that. It's roughly between 10 to 20 degrees north and south of the equator. So you've got the main growing regions in the world right now. The biggest one probably by far is Madagascar, the island of Madagascar. But then there's Indonesia, there's Papua New Guinea, and India actually grows a fair amount. The Tahitian Islands grow vanilla, as well as Mexico as another
one that does as well. So the difference, like, because we know this typically with like fruits and harvests and things like that, but in the different areas, does vanilla taste different from each of those areas, or is it something that like they grow in these climates, the equator evens that out because it's so many degrees above and below?
There's some similarities, but there's some differences too. Now, the other key thing with vanilla is that there's only 2 species of vanilla that you're allowed to make vanilla extracts with.
Okay, what are the 2 species?
And even though there's about over 150 different species of vanilla, the 2 species that you can use are vanilla planifolia, and then there's vanilla tahitensis. Those 2 species alone are different enough of that the vanilla planifolia is your typical, what they call bourbon vanilla extract. And they call it bourbon vanilla extract because Madagascar and all these areas are considered the Bourbon Islands.
Do they produce a lot of bourbon there?
They probably do some, but it's like, that vanilla is kind of like your typical vanilla where you get the nice vanilla notes like you might get in an ice cream or a vanilla cookie. And it's got like woody, it's kind of complex. You get balsamic notes, you get some fruity notes, and overall it's a really nice vanilla.
Awesome. Well, let me just say too, I am so glad that you're here to say those names of the different species, because there is no chance that I could get those out with fumbling over that. But that's very interesting. So that kind of leads me into another question that I was thinking about, because like we're currently talking about vanilla extracts too, right? But there seems to be a different segment of vanilla too, where people are used to like imitations. Like, is there some crossover between those? Like, do you have to have like a little bit of enough vanilla extract in them to call them vanilla at all? How does like vanilla go through its different nature statuses?
primary flavor ingredient in vanilla is a molecule called vanillin.
Oh, okay.
And vanillin can come from a lot of different sources. It can come from vanilla beans. They can actually make it from different natural sources. One of the common ways they used to get it years ago was there was a byproduct that was called wood pulp that basically was stuff they used to throw out from making the paper. Well, they found out that if they treat that wood pulp with certain chemicals of that, get a product called lignin, and that lignin could be converted over into vanillin.
Oh, okay. So that was just like another source that we found in the environment and decided like, oh, we could, control some costs here if we could extract that out of that as well.
Yes, and then other sources can include like clove oil has a product called eugenol, which you can convert over to vanillin. There's a byproduct from coal distillation, from coal tar, which they use that for making all kinds of petrochemicals. Boy, one of the compounds in there, you can use that to make as a source for vanillin. And you can also get it from, apparently, rice bran has a compound in it called ferulic acid, which you can actually treat with certain fungi and enzymes naturally occurring and get a natural vanillin from that.
So what you're saying is that the difference between like the imitation or the clear or the dark vanillas that are out there, the main difference is instead of using the bean itself, we're finding the big, note or chemical or flavor note that's in there. Vanillin, we're finding that in other areas and getting a cheaper version of that vanillin to help make a more cost-effective vanilla for folks that may be in some bakery applications or confection applications.
Yes, pretty much like that. And then you're adding other compounds too to because vanilla extract alone has probably over 200 different compounds in it that are responsible for the flavor. Some of them are not so noticeable, but some of them stand out a lot more. And some of those compounds are things like I mentioned, the two different species, the vanilla planifolia and vanilla tahitensis. Tahitensis is richer in a compound called anisole alcohol, which I have many better way to say it. It has kind of like a baby powder floral note to it. And if you actually would taste Tahitian vanilla versus bourbon vanilla or Madagascar vanilla, you would pick up that kind of floral note.
Oh, okay.
And they actually refer to that as a French vanilla. So if you taste a French vanilla ice cream versus a regular vanilla ice cream, you'll pick up those kind of floral, powdery notes in the French vanilla that aren't in the other one.
That's like really interesting that they needed to figure out a way to take that vanillin exponent out of like the vanilla extract and maybe find it in some other sources, because as we know, with vanilla being grown in areas that are so limited, like Madagascar, political tensions can stop the exportation of that, typhoons and things like that. So we then started producing products with that vanillin that we were finding in these other natural sources to help other folks get their hands on imitation or clear or dark vanillas as well. What does that provide for people using that vanillin and creating like an imitation?
Part of it is it gives them a more consistent product, and there's also a cost savings usually involved too with that, because the vanilla market is so volatile, and that because of the areas where it grows, it is subject to climate situations, politics plays a big part in it, and that you'll find that pure vanilla prices, they really roller coaster as far as pricing and availability is concerned.
Big thing that I know we do here at Beck is to kind of differentiate. We try to, lock in some pricing for customers over a 6 or a 12-month period to help alleviate them of being like, hey, next week it's going to be $100 more a gallon. They had a typhoon over in Madagascar, So I know that's something that we offer here at Beck Flavors for our consumers. The other thing that like really comes to the forefront of my mind is application. So is there like applications that, natural bourbon vanilla works best in or pure Madagascar does versus the alternatives that we were talking about?
There are definitely that, and also it really makes a big difference in the dairy industry because of the fact that there's a standard of identity for vanilla. There actually are guidelines in place on labeling products that contain vanilla extract, particularly dairy products. Ice cream is the biggest one because in order to call something a vanilla ice cream, natural vanilla ice cream, then you have to use vanilla extract. They're very picky on that end, at least the FDA, and there's actually been products that have been pulled off the market for mislabeling. So if you're a consumer and you want to find a nice, good vanilla ice cream, make sure that label says it's natural vanilla ice cream or it says vanilla ice cream, and read the ingredient declaration. There shouldn't be any other ingredient there but pure vanilla extract.
Yeah, and that's something that, here at Beck Flavors that we can help with as well is we have these great one and onlys like Kevin Berdak so that we can help you with all those labeling requirements as we move forward too. There's another big topic in the vanilla realm, and that's folds. So from my understanding is you can have, 1 through 20 folds. I would assume that there might not be a cap on how much you can fold vanilla. How does folding work with vanilla?
Folding, basically, if you go back to the original FDA regulations that say that you use 10 ounces of dry weight or 13.35 ounces of vanilla per gallon per fold, but that's at 25% moisture. So get rid of that moisture, it comes down to 10 ounces per gallon. So a 2-fold vanilla would actually have twice that amount of vanilla per gallon. A 3-fold would have 3 times as much. Now, when you're making your extracts, you're kind of limited by how much you can extract out of the beans because you've got so much solid you're trying to extract and so little liquid. You're going to have a lot of liquid hold up in the extract, and you're just not going to be able to get everything out. So once you get above about a 3-fold vanilla, then the only way you can get a higher fold vanilla is usually to concentrate it by distilling off the alcohol in water, concentrating it down, and then adding just
more
a small
alcohol,
amount of alcohol and water back in to bring it to a certain fold strength.
Okay, what is the highest fold?
I guess there really is, realistically, there isn't any cap on that. The highest fold extract that Beck used to make was a 20-fold extract, and that was real thick and syrupy. It was about like molasses.
What was the application for something like that?
That we would use that. Some people would want to use it where they wouldn't want to have a lot of extra solvent in their vanilla, where they just want to add a touch. And in order to make that 20-fold, you'd have to heat it up to distill off the alcohol. So that heating process would actually change the flavor some to that. So you get more of these caramelized notes, and it brings different notes to the picture.
So it's a completely different flavor profile in a sense. Not completely. It's still got its vanilla, but it almost adds in like a new flavor profile to it.
Yes, it does. And the other thing we'd use it for is you use it to make vanilla sugars, where we'd mix the vanilla with just regular cane sugar and mix it up. So now people had a powdered form that they could add maybe if they had a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and they wanted to add vanilla to it, instead of adding the bottle to it, they could just add maybe a spoonful of sugar.
Did you know that vanilla is my favorite flavored coffee? Is that why you're telling me this now?
Well,
So we're going to be tasting the vanilla sugar balls after this, everybody. So tune in for that, part 2 of the Kevin Berdak podcast. And then another thing before we touch on the pollinating of vanilla is, does vanilla ever go bad?
basically, if they're kept in a tight bottle, they're like wine. The longer they sit around, the better they get.
Like wine or like Michael Schubert, either
Yeah,
one.
and there we go. And it's like, and part of that is because you're extracting all these different compounds out of the vanilla and they start reacting with each other once you make this extract, and you start forming new compounds. And so with age, it tends to get a little bit mellower. You tend to maybe pick up some fruity notes. It gets more complex, and it's just overall a lot better product.
Why is vanilla so hard to produce? It's not necessarily like having the seeds. There's definitely part of the growing process that makes it very difficult.
Almost all the commercial vanilla grown in the world is done by cuttings. because you can grow it by seeds. The seeds are, if you've ever seen vanilla ice cream that has like little black specks in it, chances are those are the vanilla seeds that are saved after the vanilla is extracted, and they add those in just for visual. It doesn't do anything for the flavor. Originally, like say vanilla, where they got it from Mexico, that that Cortez brought it back with him, and he kind of introduced it to the rest of the world as a plant. So they're growing all these nice orchids from cuttings that would produce flowers, but they wouldn't produce any vanilla. What happened is when they moved the vanilla out of Mexico, then the natural pollinators didn't come with them, which was a specific bee.
Oh, I was going to say, I know this one from my science class. It's bees. Bees are our big pollinators, so that didn't come with them.
That didn't come with them. Of course, bees weren't the only pollinators, but those were the main ones.
Yeah.
And credit is given in 1841, I believe it was, from a boy that actually observed vanilla and observed the way plants grow with it, and he figured out a way to hand pollinate the flowers.
Okay.
And so now almost all the commercial vanilla that's grown in the world is a product of hand pollination. But the only problem is that in order to get a plant that's producing flowers, you've got a stalk that you put in the ground, and it has to grow for at least 3 years, maybe 4 years before it can actually start producing flowers.
Ooh.
And since it's a vine, you have to have something to grow it on. So a lot of places they'll use coffee plants or small trees to let the vines climb up.
Yeah.
And then once that flower blooms, better get out there and pollinate.
You got a window to do it?
You got basically about 24 hours to get in there and get that thing pollinated.
So labor intensive, and it's all about timing. Talk about price increases right there. All right, Kevin, so when you were explaining that to me, you were using a word that I'm not super familiar with, so I believe some other people might. What is cutting?
Cuttings is basically a length of vine, or length of the plant that you root.
Oh, okay, cloning.
Kind of like cloning.
Kind of like cloning.
It is cloning,
so like for those of you that are in a few other industries, cloning would be a good way to think about it, where you take the plant that's like halfway there and then you cut a piece of like the limb or the vine off of it, and then you can transplant that, and it speeds it up. You don't have to start at seed.
Yes, because seed, and unfortunately grow vanilla from seed, you need the right environment, and the other thing is that it requires certain fungi that interact with the seed that actually help it to germinate.
Oh, okay.
And once you get the seed germinating, then you're talking at least probably almost a year before you actually get a little bitty sprout on that.
Woo! That takes a long time.
And then to grow that sprout into a vine that can produce vanilla, then you're talking probably another 4, 5, 6 years. So it's pretty involved.
Yeah, so that's why they do cloning in a lot of other industries too, is you can kind of accelerate those timelines. Thank you, Kevin, for taking us behind the history of vanilla at Beck Flavors. Remember, everybody, to like, comment, and subscribe. And if there's a flavored topic you'd like us to discuss, hit us up on our socials or email us at marketing@beckflavors.com. Stay up to date on the latest flavor trends by signing up for our monthly newsletter at beckflavors.com. And as always, we'll see you next time.